Footballers are forever being beaten over the head, not literally thankfully, but by the press, over the fact that they earn too much money, in a way that we don't really see with demonstrably less talented and far wealthier professionals in other industries. For that reason, I've often stuck up for elite level footballers when they're criticised for being very highly paid. After all, few of us would turn down hundreds of thousands of pounds to do something that we love. It is remarkably difficult to get to the top of the world's most popular sport and to stay there, and many footballers, especially in recent years, have put their wealth, power, and profile to very good use. Some that we know about due to highly effective campaigning, and some which are done behind the scenes that you will almost never hear about. With that being said, it is undeniable that some footballers do earn too much money. And I don't mean Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi earning roughly £500,000 a week, or even Sergio Roberto earning in excess of £160,000 a week, which I would say is rather generous. No, I'm talking about players like Jack Rodwell during his many agonisingly terrible years at Sunderland, which were torturous for Sunderland fans as they tumbled down the divisions and were turned into a global laughingstock via a couple of Netflix mockuseries, but was very kind to Jack Rodwell's bank balance as he reportedly hoovered up £70,000 a week in wages. Yes, it is those types of players that I'm interested in today. Footballers whose wages far exceed their talents, or, more accurately, far exceed the value that the teams employing them are getting back out of them. By the way, I am well aware that non-UK viewers don't typically quote salaries on a weekly basis, but either monthly or yearly, and obviously many will be less familiar with the value of sterling. So for that reason, I'll try to give international comparisons, use different timescales, and provide some currency conversions here and there throughout the course of the video. Jeez, I'm definitely going to have complaints about the length of the intro in the comments again, aren't I? I can't even blame them. It's like I am deliberately taking the piss at this point. I still haven't even started the video. And even this is still part of the introduction. Would you believe that I actually scripted this? Here are 7 footballers who are overpaid by any measure, even if you think that all footballers are overpaid, which you would be wrong about because Deschamps Bernard clearly deserves at least £100,000 a week. Jermaine Lens. You know that I'm not one for calling people out, so to speak, but Jermaine Lens has been stealing a living for far too long now, and I don't feel particularly bad about pointing out that fact. Capped 34 times by the Netherlands, there quite obviously was a time when Lens was an effective professional footballer, most notably at PSV, where he scored 43 goals in 138 games and in his last season with AZ Alkmaar. But Lens left PSV in 2013, over 8 years ago. He has been, with the possible exception of Besiktas's 2017-18 Europa League campaign, pretty much useless for at least 6 seasons, and yet he still earns, reportedly, in excess of £40,000 a week. Many of you will remember Lens best from his time at Sunderland, which was as brief as it was eventful. The Dutchman's performance against West Ham, a game in which he scored a brilliant lob to put Sunderland 2-0 up before getting sent off as the Black Cats went on to draw 2-2, perhaps best sums up his time at the club. Sunderland survived that season, but after Lens's compatriot Dick Advocat departed and his successor Sam Allardyce didn't much like the look of him, Lens kicked up a fuss about not coming to the Premier League to sit on the bench, and he forced through a loan move to Fenerbahce. Now aged 34, Lens joined Besiktas in 2018, signing a 4-year deal said to be worth over £40,000 a week. For our friends on the continent, that is almost €200,000 a month, or for viewers in the US, the best part of $3 million a year. Now in the 4th year of that deal, Lens has barely played for Besiktas over the last 2 years. He spent last year on loan at Fatih Karagümrük, where he didn't pull up any trees, and he hasn't played a single game for anyone so far this season. And yet, he's out here earning more than the likes of Luis Diaz at Porto, Theo Hernandez at AC Milan, and Mikel Oyarzabal at Real Sociedad. Oh, and me. Don't forget me, of course. He earns more than me. That is, the real injustice here. Lens's contract is up at the end of this season, and it is hard to see where he ends up next. Either at the bottom end of the Eredivisie, or making a few more bags out in the Middle East perhaps. Anthony Martial. On talent, you could possibly maybe argue that Anthony Martial deserves to be one of the best paid players in the Premier League. On performance, consistency, and contribution, certainly this season, you absolutely could not. Martial, it is worth emphasising, is said to earn more than Mohamed Salah. That is, Mohamed Salah, Liverpool star man, and arguably the most informed player in world football, who has 21 goals and 9 assists already this season. And Anthony Martial, Manchester United outcast, who has 1 goal and 0 assists so far this season. Martial is evidently an enormous talent. He joined Manchester United as the most expensive teenage footballer of all time, and in his debut campaign, he topped the club's scoring charts. From that moment on, though, the Frenchman has been hugely frustrating. Brilliant and absent in almost equal measure, for all of his skill, speed, and ability, Martial ultimately just hasn't clicked at Old Trafford over the last 18 months at least. And with Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford, and Mason Greenwood all being younger than him, and Cristiano Ronaldo and Edinson Cavani seemingly more favoured through the middle, it is difficult to see how a separation isn't inevitable at this stage. There are only 32 players in world football who are believed to earn more than Martial, who has a reported weekly wage of £250,000, which works out at over 15 million euros or 17 million US dollars a year. Given the fact that Erling Haaland, Bernardo Silva, and Bruno Fernandes are all reported to earn far less, along with Mohamed Salah of course, dare I suggest that Manchester United are no longer getting great value for money from the former Monaco man. Martial is still only 26, and at the time of recording, he is being linked with a move to Atletico Madrid. Samuel Umtiti. I'm being charitable when it comes to Samuel Umtiti due to his many injuries, and only putting him in 5th. But I'm afraid I am not so lenient as to leave him out of this 7 altogether. As with Anthony Martial, Samuel Umtiti is a player of considerable talent, as he displayed, most emphatically perhaps, at the 2018 World Cup, but also over a number of years at both Lyon and Barcelona. However, Barcelona developed an unfortunate habit of paying absolutely ludicrous wages over the past decade, and I'm afraid to say that Umtiti's salary seems more than a little generous to me. His current contract with the club, which he signed in the summer of 2018 when his reputation was at its highest, is reportedly worth £263,000 a week. Again, that is more than Mohamed Salah earns, but to give a comparison with fellow centre-backs, it is more than double what Aymeric Laporte earns, it's almost 3 times as much as Thiago Silva earns, and it is about 9 times what Simon Kjaer is reportedly earning at AC Milan. That is pretty wild for a man who hasn't played more than 20 games in all competitions in any of the last 3 seasons, and won't do so again for a 4th year this season. Umtiti has had a series of horrible knee injuries at Barcelona, and he was booed by fans in a pre-season earlier this year who felt that his refusal to leave the club had been a key reason behind Lionel Messi's enforced departure. Umtiti, who has been an unused substitute for Barcelona 14 times this season, started his first game of the season for the club 4 days before this recording, playing all 96 minutes in a 2-2 draw with Osasuna. At his absolute best, Umtiti is a solid centre-back, maybe even challenging the top 10 centre-backs in the world. But even then, I don't think he's a £260,000 a week footballer, and right now, he is absolutely nowhere near that. Marcelo. First things first, I want to be absolutely clear about one thing, which is that Marcelo has been a magnificent servant to Real Madrid. Signed by Los Blancos some 15 years ago, Marcelo was, for a number of years, the best left-back in the world, and he could stake a compelling claim to be the finest left-back of his generation. However, if Real Madrid are going to pay people £250,000 a week just because they used to be the best left-back in the world for them, well, I suppose that is great news for Roberto Carlos, but it's also a slightly dubious way in which to run a football club. The reality is that, as good as Marcelo was, he is now a liability whenever he plays, which, admittedly, isn't very often. And that isn't just this season, in which he has made 5 appearances and has looked rubbish in, I would say, all but one of them. We are talking about the last 3 seasons now. As with Umtiti, Marcelo's extortionate wage can be attributed to his fantastic timing, having agreed to his current deal at the Santiago Bernabeu, which will come to an end when this season finishes, back in the summer of 2017, when he too was playing some of the best football of his career. As good on the ball as most forwards in his prime, Marcelo was explosive, adventurous, and a superb outlet down the left flank for Real Madrid. Ultimately though, Marcelo was never the most positionally disciplined of fullbacks, and now that he looks much slower and more lethargic, he is routinely exposed at the highest level. If you classify David Alaba as being a centre-back, then Marcelo is the best paid fullback in the world, and he certainly isn't among the best fullbacks in the world anymore. I suspect that he isn't even in the top 50. Marcelo is only 33, and his technical ability means that I think he could probably still do a job back in Brazil, playing a little bit further up the pitch with fewer defensive responsibilities. But the fact that he earns 3 times as much as Alphonso Davies and almost 7 times as much as Theo Hernandez is patently absurd, and there was no way that I could leave him out, former glories notwithstanding. Danny Drinkwater. Long-term subscribers to this channel will know that this is not the first time that I've made a video taking a look at overpaid footballers. Nor was it the first time, a couple of weeks ago, when I made an updated video looking at some of the most underpaid players within the game. These are part of a very small number of videos that I can make updated versions of every season or every couple of seasons because players change clubs, contracts, they start playing better or worse, they retire, and so on and so forth. So the 7 players featured change every single time. Except Danny Drinkwater. Like Eddie Hearn when you are just trying to watch some boxing, he is always there. That is because Drinkwater joined Chelsea in 2017 for a fee of £35 million, and just so we're clear, that is 35 million actual pounds sterling of real money, not monopoly money or virtually tradable non-fungible tokens, and he was rewarded with a 5-year contract reportedly worth £120,000 a week, on account of the fact that he looked alright for a bit alongside N'Golo Kante and qualified for the homegrown player quota. Alright, maybe that's being a bit harsh. Drinkwater did a decent job at Leicester, but a £35 million or £120,000 a week footballer he is not, was not, and will never be. This is Drinkwater's last season contracted to Chelsea, and he is spending it on loan with Reading in the Championship, his 4th loan move since joining the Blues. I've watched Reading a couple of times this season, including against my own team Hull City, and Drinkwater was okay. Nothing more, nothing less. Just a steady Eddie, competent Championship midfielder, no better or worse than someone like Greg Doherty in the Hull City midfield. Yet Drinkwater earns over €7 million or $8 million a year before bonuses, whilst Doherty reportedly earns around £250,000 a year. I think this one is a pretty open and shut case, and you probably didn't even need me to make an argument in favour of him featuring. But just in case, it is worth noting that Drinkwater, allegedly, still earns more than Chelsea teammates Edouard Mendy and Mason Mount, over twice as much as Federico Chiesa, and the same amount as Phil Foden. What a time to be alive. Isco. One of the most frustrating footballers on the planet, even more so than Anthony Martial perhaps, Isco is someone who I for so long had hoped would eventually really nail down his mast as one of the world's most talented midfielders, but alas, it now seems certain that that will not be the case. In full flow, there are few players who are as graceful and gifted as the 29-year-old Spaniard. Isco made his name at Malaga while still in his teens, where he won the Golden Boy Award, and Real Madrid always seemed like the favourites to sign Isco ahead of Manchester City, with both teams having been interested in the summer of 2013. Los Blancos got their man, and whilst Carlo Ancelotti struggled to accommodate Isco in his 4-3-3 system, he enjoyed a decent debut campaign when he was called upon. The following season, Isco dropped a little deeper into midfield and often impressed, as Zinedine Zidane even drew comparisons between the playmaker and himself. But there was always a sense that there was so much more to come. As time has passed by, that real revelatory breakout season in which Isco puts himself in true Ballon d'Or contention has just never arrived. When Cristiano Ronaldo left Real Madrid, I thought that one of Isco or Gareth Bale would make a real concerted effort to step into the shoes that he vacated. An almost impossible task, of course, but both are wonderful footballers who could have gone some way towards plugging that gap. In truth, both have actually regressed as players since then. Isco didn't score a single goal and made just 2 assists in 29 games last season, and he has grabbed just 1 goal and 0 assists from 7 outings so far this term. That is not the form that one would typically expect of a midfielder or wide man who earns in excess of £200,000 a week. Isco earns more than Angel Di Maria and Dani Olmo combined, which is plainly just stupid at this point, and he is yet another player in this 7 whose current contract is set to finish at the end of this season. And if it is renewed at anything like that value, I would be absolutely flabbergasted. John Mary. Topping this 7 is the least well-known player to feature in it, and I haven't just put him in top spot because his parents combined 2 biblical Christian names to form his full name. John Mary, whose middle names include Matthew, Mark, Luke, Joseph, and the little baby Jesus, is a forward who was born in Nigeria but won his first and only cap to date for Cameroon earlier this year. And no, those are not really all of his middle names. His full name is actually John Mary Hone Uzegabunam, which, at least I could pronounce his made-up name. Having begun his professional career playing in Thailand, Mary spent 3 years playing in Europe, in Serbia and Slovenia to be specific, either side of his 2 stints in Asia. In the 2018 and 2019 seasons, Mary scored prolifically for Meizhou Haka in the China League 1, which is the second tier of Chinese football, which earns him a move to Shenzhen in the Chinese Super League. Mary has, to date, scored a pretty impressive 20 goals in 32 games for Shenzhen, though he is currently on loan with Avispa Fukuoka in Japan. That's because the Kaiser Group, a large Chinese property development and management company, is one of a number of Chinese companies that has seen the value of their company tank over the last 12 months. Kaiser shares are down 75% year to date, with investors losing faith that the company will be able to repay their outstanding $400 million debts. Manager Jordi Cruyff recently stepped down as Mary became the latest in a raft of players to flee China's sinking Super League. Though Mary still earns his Shenzhen wages, they are just being covered by Avispa in the J-League. Those wages are reportedly worth more than £130,000 a week, for a striker to whom the J-League is probably actually the highest level that he has ever played at. Mary has scored 7 goals in 19 games so far this season, which isn't bad going, but he earns as much as Erling Haaland and more than Ciro Immobile, and one wonders how many goals they would bag out in Japan. Interestingly, the J-League's top scorer this season is former Football Manager legend Leandro Damião, who has scored 52 goals in 115 games since signing for Kawasaki Frontale in 2019. So that is it for today's video, but honourable mentions go to the likes of Steven Nzonzi, Gareth Bale, Philippe Coutinho, Eden Hazard, Joe Linton, Joe Allen, and Dan Traore, among many, many others. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. I thoroughly hope that you enjoyed today's video. Hit the like button if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And make sure this festive season that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.